So today we're going to continue our conversation regarding dimensional analysis, but this time our unit conversions are going to involve prefixes. And prefixes, you can see, are on your reference table, New York State Chemistry Reference Table, Table C. And so I'm going to take a second to kind of explain how Table C works. So I want you to, if you have a printed New York State reference table, to just write directly on your table as I am. And if you don't have one printed, then to rewrite the table in your notes following what I write. So next to the factor, I am going to use the unit meters, but you can use other units. We're just going to use meters for this worksheet. And so I have 10 to the third meters equals, and then I'm going to put a 1 in front of my prefix, and it's kilo, and I'm going to write meters at the end. And I did the same for all the other factors as well. So you can see in the second row, 10 to the negative 1 meters equals 1 decimeter, and so on and so forth. So the way you look at this is how my little note to myself on the side looks. So I just rewrote 10 to the third meters equals 1 kilometer. And so again, you can write this conversion factor one of two ways. You can either write it where 10 to the third meters is on top, like in the first example, or you can write 10 to the third meters on bottom, like in the second example, with kilometers in the opposite spot. So those are your two options for how to write your conversion factor. And it makes sense that you can write it either way, because 10 to the third meters equals 1 kilometer. So it's saying like 2 equals 2. Doesn't matter which 2 you put on top if you're doing 2 divided by 2, because they're the same thing. Even though the two parts, they look different, they mean the exact same thing. So you can write either one on top or on bottom. So we're going to use these prefixes as our conversion factors on the worksheet on the next page. So for number 1, it says convert 10 picometers into meters. For all of these problems, the first step is to write the number and the unit that goes with the number as the start of the problem. So I'm just going to go 10 picometers. I'm going to abbreviate and just write PM. And then the second thing I'm always going to write is the unit I'm trying to convert into, which in the first example is meters on the right side. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for all of them really quick so that I have all my problems set up nicely. So I have 100 kilometers, and I'm converting that into meters. And then the next one, I have 5.00 meters, and I'm converting that into decimeters. And then for the next one, I have 80 nanometers, and I'm converting that into meters. And for the last one, I have, what color have I not used yet? For the last one, I have 1,000 millimeters, and I'm converting that to meters. Okay, so now I have all my problems set up, so I just have to figure out what conversion factors I need to get to my answer. And for all of these problems, these are all one-step problems, so I'm only going to need one conversion factor for each. There are problems that need multiple conversion factors, but these are not those. So let's do the first one. To convert between picometers and meters, we have to go back to our reference table C, and find the prefix that best fits to convert us between those two units. So which conversion factor do you think I should use? And I'm just going to label them A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. G is the best one to use because it has picometers and meters, which are the two things that we need in the first problem. So let's see. So our conversion factor, and I'm just going to write it at the top here, is that for every 10 to the negative 12 meters, we have 1 picometer. So that I got right off of table C. And again, you can write this one of two ways, with either meters on top or picometers on top. So I can write it like this. Negative 12 meters on top. That's a minus sign. And then 1 picometer on bottom. Or I can write it with 1 picometer on top and 10 to the negative 12 meters on bottom. Okay, so in our parentheses for our first one, which way do you think I should write it? This first way or the second way? If you said the first way, you are correct because we need our units of picometers to cancel. So our units, picometers, they cancel. And our end unit, I didn't write the unit here, is meters, and our end unit here is meters, so we know we did it correctly. So the next challenge is to make sure we plug it into our calculator correctly. So I'm just going to give us some space here. So when you plug it into your calculator, based on the last video you guys watched, you want to use the EE function. So on your calculator somewhere, you're going to see this double E. And all that means is it's the same thing as saying times 10 and then to some number. It doesn't say what number, you get to add the number that you're putting it to. So for example, if I want to write in my calculator 1 times 10 to the 5th, all I have to do is go 1 and then use my EE function, which will only appear as E when it's actually used on the calculator. So it would be 1E5. That's the same thing as saying 1 times 10 to the 5th. And so you're always going to use your EE function in place of times 10. And so let's try it out on the first problem. So for the first problem, we're doing, I'm just going to move this over. We're doing 10 times, and this is really 1 times 10 to the negative 12. If you want to go ahead and write, oh no, what did I do? If you want to go ahead and write 1 times in front of all of these, you can. 1 times, 1 times. It might make it look a little easier. It still means the same thing. 1 times anything is still that thing. So when we're plugging this into our calculator, we're going to do 10 times 1e negative 12. And when you do that, your answer is going to be 1e negative 11, which is the same thing as saying 1 times 10 to the negative 11th power. That was multiplying our top numbers. Multiplying our bottom numbers, we just have 1 on the bottom because 1 times 1 is 1. So our answer is just 1 times 10 to the negative 11. if the E thing is confusing you, you can plug into your calculator 10 times 1 times 10 to the negative 12. Oops, that's not a 2. But you have to make sure that there's parentheses around those numbers. Because if there's not, then when you do division, it's going to be problematic. So you just need to make sure that you always include parentheses. Okay, let's try the second problem. So for the second problem, our unit conversion, or our conversion factor, is we're going between kilometers and meters. So we need to use the first conversion factor, 1 times 10 to the third equals 1 kilometer. 1 times 10 to the third meter equals 1 kilometer. And again, you can either write it you can write it two different ways, where you have 1 times 10 to the third meters on top and 1 kilometer on bottom. Or you can write it with 1 kilometer on top and 1 times 10 to the third meters on bottom. For this second problem, you want to have kilometers cancel. So it makes sense to use the first conversion factor, writing it the first way, because then your conversion, your kilometers, your unit will cancel here, and you are left with your meters, 1 times 10 to the third meters on top. Your end unit is meters, so that is the correct way to write it. So you just gotta plug it into your calculator now, and I'm just gonna move that over here. So 100 times 1 times 10 to the third. If I plug it into my calculator using the EE function, it's gonna look like this. 100 times 1 EE 3. And when you do that, you're gonna get 100,000. So that is your top number. I just multiplied the top numbers together. 100 times 1 times 10 to the third. The bottom numbers are all 1, so it's divided by 1, so it's still 100,000 on top. For the next problem, we are converting between meters and decimeters. So we need to find the conversion factor for those two. So if we go to our reference table again, meters and decimeters is the second conversion factor. So 1 times 10 to the negative 1 meters equals 1 decimeter. So I'm just going to write that up top. 1 times 10 to the negative 1 meters equals 1 decimeter. And again, you can choose which one you want to have on top or on bottom. So in this problem, you should have it so that the meters go on bottom, because you want meters to cancel. And you want to have decimeters on top because that is your end unit, is in decimeters. So here, meters cancel. So all you have to do is 5.00 times 1. So that's easy. That's just going to be 5. And then on bottom, so again, your first number is always divided by 1, just to make it easier to multiply the first number by the second number. So 1 times 1 times 10 to the negative 1 is just 0.1 on the bottom. And you can plug this into your calculator if you don't believe me. 1e negative 1 gets you 0.1. So then 5 divided by 0.1, and I'm just going to move my decimeter so again. 5 divided by 0.1 gets us 50 decimeters. If you're being careful of significant figures here, because it looks like 5.00, that has 3 sig figs, then we want our answer to also have 3 sig figs. So I'm going to put a 50.0 decimeters. Okay. So I'm going to put the conversion factors on the bottom of the page for the next two, and I want you to see if you can get them on your own. So I have the conversion factor for number 4 and number 5 on the bottom. And again, each one only requires 1 parentheses. So for number 4, 1 times 10 to the negative 9 meters equals 1 nanometer. You want to have 1 nanometer on the bottom so that units of nanometers cancel. And you're going to have 1 times 10 to the negative 9 meters on top. And so when you multiply this, you're doing 80 times 1e negative 9. And that gets you 8 times 10 to the negative 8. And on the bottom, 1 times 1 is 1, so our answer is just 8 times 10 to the negative 8 meters. For the last one, you want to have millimeters cancel, so you're going to put your 1 millimeter on bottom. And so now your millimeters cancel, and on top, 1 times 10 to the 3rd meters. And when you plug that into your calculator, 1,000 times 1 to the 3rd gets you, it looks like 1 million. 1 million. And that's in units of meters. Oh, I saw negative, I missed the negative 3. We're converting from millimeters to meters, so that's my bad. So it's 1,000 times 1 times 10 to the negative 3. So I just double checked because that didn't make sense to me. So if I go back and change it to 1,000 times 1 e to the negative 3, our answer is actually just 1. So we only have 1 meter, which makes sense because 1,000 millimeters is in a meter. So this is 1 millimeter, and on bottom we have just 1 also because 1 times 1 is 1. So your answer is just 1 meter. Okay, so that is converting with prefixes using dimensional analysis.